This is the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast from Advanta IRA, where we show you how to explore investments beyond Wall Street and open your eyes to new options for your portfolio. It's time to take control and give yourself the freedom to choose where you invest your money.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast. My name is Alex Perny, and today we are very pleased to welcome on Abraham Gray. We're going to be covering financing, the other part of the equation when it comes to real estate. Too often, I think most of us, when we think about investing in real estate and other things, we kind of look at this, big sexy picture of owning real estate, right? But there's so many other facets that you can use to control real estate, be invested, be exposed, while also having that inherent security that real estate does offer. Throughout my career, one of the more interesting things that I've gotten to learn and appreciate has been in the financing space. I really never thought much of it, past just I understood that I had to get a mortgage to buy my own home. But as far as the investing aspect of it goes, the power that you can glean and really the amount of money you can make and how creative you can be by being on the money side of the equation is fascinating. So Abraham, thank you so much for being on with us today. If you wouldn't mind, give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself and we'll kind of jump right into it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. So my background is I am 50 years old this year. I started my first business when I was 15, 35 years ago. And when I was 22, I started buying properties, and a few years later, I started lending money to people that were buying properties for fix and flips. So over the last 5 to 10 years, I've grown my lending business a lot. That's what we're mostly going to talk about today. I own dozens and dozens of businesses. I've owned hundreds of businesses throughout my time, and I've owned thousands of properties. I currently own 200 and some properties as rentals. I do a lot of fix and flips, but I do a lot of lending. So that's what we're going to focus on today. And I lend money to people that do fix and flips. And I only lend in Georgia, primarily the Atlanta market, for a lot of different reasons. But there's tons of people out there that can find good deals and make a lot of money on fix and flips, but they need the financing for it. So this is like shorter term financing, around 6 months on average. And they're willing to pay a lot higher rates than a normal type of loan. Like if you go buy a home to live in now, it's probably going to be in the 6% or 7% range. For fix and flippers, they're happy to pay, triple that, or at least double to 3 times that. So there's a lot of opportunity there to make money. And people just have to know how to protect themselves, make sure that they're loaning the right amount, make sure they have all the right collateral to where if you don't get paid, you could take over the property and sell and get your money back. That's primarily what I've focused on a lot over the past 5 years, to where I've been growing my business, where I have always $25 to $30 million out at all times. I would say a little bit over $10 million is my own money. And then the other 15 to 20 million are investors' money, people that I know, people that want to make good returns on their money as well.
Yeah, now it's always kind of interesting to start at the beginning because more often than not, a lot of people get their start in real estate. Single family homes, maybe they do a few fix and flips themselves, or they get the itch for real estate, kind of on the equity side of things, which again sounds kind of like your story right here. Mm-hmm. Now, what was one of the first impetuses for you to get into the lending market? Was it just that you saw you had a few friends, or just someone said, "Hey, I need money," and you had sold a property and had some cash laying around? What was that kind of initial catalyst that you got into it with?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened, what you just said. So I was doing a bunch of fix and flips. This is in my 20s, so over 20 some years ago. And a friend of mine is like, "Oh, can you lend me money for a fix and flip I'm doing? I don't have enough money to fund the whole thing." I'm like, "All right, show me the details." They showed it to me. I loaned them some money, and I just, after that, loaned that person money a few times on a few more. And then from there, he told one of his friends, and now I was loaning 2 people money. And then it just kind of grew, and I was like, this could be a real business. And eventually, it grew into what it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really the key that people don't realize is that, the fix and flip market, especially, again, there's plenty of institutional players. I mean, you have Fannie Freddie, you have a bunch of people in the institutional space that really kind of, for the more traditional buyer, right? If you're someone that maybe wants to go out and buy a couple properties to hold and rent out, right? There's plenty of money to be made in that market, but your your economics of it look a lot different. It's a lot more of a longer play. You don't really get to capture as many of the interesting things in the short term, especially with one, how much you can charge, and two, how fast they turn around.
Yeah.
Because one of the big caveats to lending is that when someone pays you off, normally people think that's a really great thing, right? Which it can be, but also you need to have your money working. Loans only work while they're still there. You don't get to install a new tenant in a loan like you do in a rental property. So with the aspects of why you kind of started, you also mentioned that you kind of primarily focus in Georgia. I know a lot of clients in Georgia. That's how we got connected. So we have a footprint in the metro
Yeah.
Atlanta area. But is there something besides just the geographical location to Georgia
Oh, a
that
lot.
makes it attractive?
Georgia is one of the best states in the country for doing loans, in particularly on real estate, because it's the fastest state in the country to foreclose. So if someone doesn't pay me, I could foreclose in 30 days. That's how long it takes, 30 days. So the first Tuesday of every single month are the foreclosure auctions, and you just have to have a notice in the local county paper for 30 days. So as long as I put that notice in the paper 30 days, the first Tuesday of the month after those 30 days, I can foreclose. And so it's very safe. There's some states that are 3 months, 6 months, a year. Some are even more than a year. So if you loan somebody money and you want to take your collateral back and it takes you 6 months or a year or longer, that's not really a sexy place to loan money. There are other states that take 30 days as well, but Georgia is one of them. And the other really cool thing about Georgia is that there's something called usury laws.
Mhm.
Usury laws are how much is the max you're allowed to charge somebody interest. So that's state by state as well.
Yep.
So every single state has a different amount, and Georgia is a minimum of 60%. So that's 5% a month. So I'm never charging anywhere near that much. So I know I'm really safe. But there's some states like Texas, which is also a good state for real estate investing, but the usury law in Texas is 18%. So the most you could charge is 1.5%. And that includes any closing fees, points, all kinds of different things. So you got to be really careful not to charge more, because then if you charge more and somebody realizes it and ends up not paying you, and they have an attorney that's smart, they'll be like, oh, wait a second, how much did you pay? You're paying more than you're allowed to. You could probably get out of not even having to pay anything. And so there's all kinds of different laws in different states. So you've got to know the laws for the usury laws. You got to know the foreclosure laws. And Georgia has the best for both. It's very lender friendly, should I say. And then the other cool thing about the Georgia foreclosure laws are, and most states are like this, but there's some that are not. The second that the property gets auctioned and sold, whoever buys it, they own it. That's it. It's their property. There's no right to redemption, meaning that whoever owns it owns it. The person that lost it can't 3 months from now go back and say, well, I want to buy it back from that person. There are some states that have 6 months up to a 1 year redemption. So you could buy a home at an auction, and then 11 months later in some states, the person that lost it could go and buy it back from you. Obviously, they have to pay you whatever interest rate is according to that state that they charge, but you can't do anything with the property. You can't fix it up. You can't sell it. So it's not it's just not as sexy. So in Georgia, someone doesn't pay you, the property is yours 30 days later. At the worst case, and you don't time it right with when you put it in the paper, it could technically be a 2 cycle, so maybe up to 60 days, but that's kind of rare.
Yeah, exactly. And the other, so we kind of covered a couple different topics right there, and we're going to break down a few things for people to kind of make sure you understand where some of these benefits lie. First being kind of the foreclosure aspect. You have two basic forms and flavors of the United States. You have judicial and non-judicial. Non-judicial states like Georgia, again, it can be significantly easier from the burden of what you have to do to put people on notice. Some other states, you have a whole other litany list of things you have to do. Now, foreclosure is an important thing to look at, right? But part of underwriting any loan is kind of, making sure that typically you don't want to go through that process, right? It's going to be better if someone can, pay you points, pay you interest, and then they can pay it off and you can keep working with them, right? 'Cause you typically don't go back and foreclose on a property and lend them money 2 months down the road, right? It's, you want to kind of build those relationships, and lending is a really nice way to be able to build those continuing relationships. And that's kind of the other half of this equation that I really appreciate about lending, is that real estate purchases are typically very transactional, right? You buy it from the person that sold it, and yeah, they may have another one down the road, but typically they sell it and you don't see them again. You see renters and other people on a more frequent basis. But when you lend people money, you can build very long-term relationships with people and build a very high level of trust that can really kind of lead into that repeat business that's going to help grow whatever you're trying to build. The other one being usury. Now, a lot of people, if you're getting into lending on the initial front, don't realize that there's a certain amount of interest or kind of, people might think how much money you can make on a certain deal. And while that is certainly a concern, operating in states, especially in the short-term markets, it's very important to understand kind of how those things can be packaged. And I have a few questions for you on that front. So when it comes to usury, at least in the state of Georgia, how is that compounded? Because I know some of the more interesting things that I've seen have been creative financing deals where maybe there's some equity participation, right? You get to participate in a little bit of the equitable growth when someone's flipping properties. So are there any additional concerns that people need if they're going out and lending when it comes to, at least, let's pick on the state of Georgia, right? For that aspect of saying, hey, like if you're going to get real creative with this, what are some things that people may not realize kind of add into that total cap on usury?
Yeah, so with usury, every state has its cap, and most states that have a really high cap, like Georgia, for instance, with 60% on the low side, there's actually some type of loans that can even be higher. If you're charging more than the usury in Georgia, let's say you're charging 75% when you only allowed to charge 60. I've talked to tons of attorneys. They've never seen a case in Georgia where someone actually sued someone for being over the usury, because the usury is so high that no one even looks to see if you're over it. So a lot of times it gets bypassed. And again, if you charge somebody more than usury in any state, you're only going to really get in trouble if the person that you charge makes a big deal about it, or has an attorney and then tries to go after you. I know people in some states that have low usury laws purposely get loans from people at higher rates because they know that they could fight it and end up getting all the interest back, and sometimes even getting some of the principal forgiven in some crazy states. So there are people that will target you purposely to give you loans at really high rates in some crazy states, because because the states have crazy laws to where they can actually make money off suing you back for charging more.
Professional borrowers, right?
Professional borrowers. But as far as being able to charge more than the usury law legally, there are a few ways to do it. The one way was what you were just talking about. If you were to go partnerships with somebody and split the profits, that would be one way to get around usury laws. However, it's got to be done, especially in the really picky states, it's got to be done in a way that if you're partnering with someone, you can't just partner with them by giving them money. You got to partner with them by actually, bringing the labor, or, going to check on the property, or doing something actually with the property besides just lending the money. If you're only lending the money and that's your partnership, that doesn't really bypass the usury law. But if you're actually helping in the rehab, or finding the location, or finding the buyer, or, inspecting it, or doing physical stuff with the property, then you could have a partnership agreement that you split profits and get around the usury laws if you're doing that.
Yeah, constructive participation in some type of financial agreement is really kind of what you need to look for that. And again, keeping in mind that, whatever, usury typically is going to encompass any type of return that is being made on lending someone money. So just because it's not an interest rate, and again, typically, again, in the more creative spaces, you're not going to, even in Georgia where it's 60%, you're not going to see, fee simple interest of 50%. The way that you might kind of not realize, especially if you want to get into creative financing, is when you start adding in some of those creative aspects. But again, at the end of the day, the other nice thing about lending on real estate is that it can be a very mutually beneficial relationship between you and the borrower, right? They have a need for capital, you want to make a return, and you get to negotiate those terms, right? There's really no one out there besides, usury and a few other things that says, hey, here's what it has to be, right? If there's someone that says, hey, look, I want to do, a 6-month balloon at this interest rate with maybe a biweekly payment, or maybe just, an initial point offering and then a lump sum payment with no intermediary payments. You can get real creative and help make what they're looking to get accomplished done, so that way they can pay you back according to that and then continue on down to the next one. And before we kind of get into some of the other aspects of maybe some of the deal making and the thought process that goes into packaging some of these together, which I'd love to pick your brain about, deed conveyance, because that's another one that I didn't really, kind of grasp. Most people would think that, hey, if you go through a foreclosure process, right, like you get a deed, it's yours. In most any other case, you go to a closing, you get that signed deed, like you can go and bulldoze the property the next day. I mean, you know, just need a demolition permit, but again, there's really nothing else after the check clears escrow to really consider, right? So, how much of a variance is that state to state when people look at it when it comes to the foreclosure process and actually getting a deed? Is it like every 50 states, 50 flavors, or is
Yeah.
it kind of one of two camps?
Yeah, I mean, every state has definitely a different law. Some of them are very minorly different, but they're all different in different ways. Some states, again, the person that lost the house has up to a year to buy it back. Some they have up to a month. Some they have up to a month to have a hearing to see if something wasn't done right to buy it back. Uh, so it really just depends. And in every state, if they are able to buy it back in that particular state, which most states you can't, but there's a lot you could, they have different interest rates that the person that bought it is going to get. Some it's as low as 18, 15%. Some it's in the 20, 30%. So it depends. It's still a good return for somebody if they buy it and have to hold it. But you've got to decide, if you're okay with, you're buying it to make a big profit, to fix and flip it yourself, or are you okay with just a good profit,
Yeah.
and waiting it out. But I would say that you should definitely check to see what the laws are in the states if you're ever loaning money or if you're ever borrowing money, so what rights you have or don't have for sure.
Yeah, and just like if you're coming from the more traditional purchase and maybe a being more of a landlord type, think about all the laws that go into landlord tenant law, right? You have a lot of those kind of analogs that can go in between the lender borrower aspect, right? So in any capacity, if you're going to be lending someone money, doing your homework is underwriting that loan is just more than saying, hey, like, do I feel comfortable with this person borrowing my money? Is the project and the scope something that's realistic? Like, making sure you understand a lot of this stuff. And again, some states are significantly easier to deal with than others. In general, at least in my experience, the Southeast United States is going to be a generally easier state from a lot
Yeah,
of those aspects. Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Tennessee. Like
100%.
those are going to be your easier ones from maybe we're just more laid back. I don't know.
Yeah,
But it's in general, that's kind of what you're looking at. So let's
yeah,
kind of go into kind of some of the meat of this, right?
yeah.
Now, you like to focus on the fix and flip market. Now,
Hmm.
from an outside perspective, a lot of people think, hey, fix and flip, they think speculation, they might think higher risk. But with that, anything, your risk profile should include an appropriate reward profile. So,
Right.
I know you said you got your first start, that was kind of, you had a friend that needed some capital, they were doing it. But was there something specific, or was there something specific that keeps you in the fix and flip market,
Yeah,
even with
there's a lot of reasons why I only land on fix and flips. Well, first off, there's a lot more money people make on fix and flips. And on an average fix and flip, someone's making $30,000 to $35,000 on an average fix and flip in Georgia in the Atlanta market. For like a $300,000 home, you're going to be making 3 to 30 to 35,000 bucks. So people make a lot of money in a short period of time. Like this all happens within a 6 month period. So they could afford to pay higher interest rates because they're making so much that if they didn't have that, if they didn't have the money to buy it, they would lose more. Maybe they're paying $5,000 to $10,000 of interest over that course of that loan, but they're making 35, so they have plenty of extra money to work with. If you were lending on a rental, people are barely able to cover their costs on a 5 or 6% interest. On a high interest for like a fix and flip, people would lose money every single month of borrowing money at the rates that that a fix and flip loan would be. So you can't even loan on that. As far as risk tolerance, to me, it's way safer to loan on a fix and flip because there's no tenants involved, and you just got to finish it and sell it. Once there's a tenant involved, it becomes riskier because now if someone doesn't pay you, besides the fact they're not going to be able to afford it because the rents won't justify the interest you're charging, now you have to possibly, after you buy the property, evict the tenant. And that's just a lot longer of a process. So that's not state by state. That's actually county by county. So some counties, you can evict someone pretty fast. But some counties, it could take 6 months or longer. So now, and the same thing, if you're foreclosing on a property, now again, I only do fix and flips. So I don't have to kick people out ever if I foreclose. And I don't foreclose that often. It's very rare because I'm loaning the right amount. I'm underwriting the deal. And people have too much equity, so they don't let me foreclose. They could sell it for more than what they owe me, so it makes no sense for them to close. But let's just say I was loaning to someone that had a renter in there, or maybe they lived there themselves, If I foreclose, I own the property, or whoever buys it at the foreclosure auction owns the property. But now they have to go through the eviction process after the foreclosure process. They're two separate processes. So it's more risky because now you have to take a lot more time and more money and cost and holding costs to get that person out. So fix and flips to me, you're loaning on the as is value, not what it's worth after it's fixed up. So you're really, really safe. And you don't have to worry about kicking anyone out because it's probably in the fix and flip stage where it's not ready. But again, you're not lending money to someone that's going to rent it out, and you're not lending to someone that's a primary home. So it's a very fast process after you take the home over. But again, underwriting is the key. If you loan somebody too much money, doesn't matter what the deal is. The odds are they're not going to pay you because they already got more than it's worth. So you've got to be very careful in the underwriting process. That's very, very important. What I see most people lend is somewhere between 70 to 80% on the high side of loan to value, LTV, right? So that's pretty much what we're lending on, and that's the as is value. And then, of course, if you want to loan part of the rehab, that's fine too. You could loan for the rehab, but you do that in draws as people do the rehab. So they have to do $10,000 worth of work, then you give them 10,000. Then they do another 10. You never give them the money before they do the work because they end up going to Vegas. You never see the money. So, and you don't have collateral. Your collateral is gone. The only reason why it's worth doing rehab loans is because the collateral is there. They already did the rehab before you pay them. So that's very important as well.
Sure. So are you mainly looking at, and again, this is a really important distinction because when it comes to fix and flips, again, there's kind of two different buckets that you can lend on, right? Or, depending if you want to combine them. So are you primarily focused on the acquisition, like taking first position in the acquisition of the property, and then the person buying it typically finances or deploys their own capital for the rehab, or do you get into the rehab as well? Let's
Yeah.
kind of go from the beginning of where you'd like to start underwriting this.
So I only do first position loans. Anyone that does second position loans, so I'm in a bunch of groups that tons of people do loans. What I'll tell you is if people underwrite the property correctly and they do first position loans, it's such a small fraction amount of problems that people have as far as having to foreclose or even losing money or anything. It's very rare. When you start talking about second position loans, I would say that over half the people that I know that do them lose money. Half. And I'm talking about less than 1% have a problem with first position, where over half have problems with second position. We could get into the difference if you want, but in first position, you're loaning the right amount, and if someone doesn't pay you, you could sell it for more than you loan them. In second position, you can't do that for a lot of reasons. First off, you have to pay off the first position lender. Secondly, and this happens a lot in second position, someone might lend someone money in second position. Let's say a home is worth 100. Let's say you would loan them 100,000. Easy numbers. Let's say you'd loan them $100,000 in first position, but they already have a first position lender for 80,000. So you're thinking, okay, well, I'd loan them 100,000 in first. I have 20,000 more I can loan them in second. It doesn't work that way because what happens is, and this happens every single time, if you have to protect yourself if someone doesn't pay you. If someone doesn't pay you that 20,000, what else are they not paying? Well, they're probably not paying the first position, they're 80, which is going to make the first position now have all kinds of late fees, interest payments that are missed, and then probably at some point legal fees, foreclosure fees. That's going to eat away your $20,000 of equity you thought you had. So now you thought you had 20,000 equity, but that 20,000, that $80,000 loan in first position is going to end up being a $100,000 payoff because of all these missed payments and late fees and attorney fees and everything else. So in second position, you got to underwrite totally different, assuming that if you don't get paid, the first position is going to get a lot more than what the original loan was because of all these extra fees and missed payments. So that's something that's really important. When I loan people money in first position, I very rarely get like credit scores or figure out all these different things. I look at the property itself because that's what's really important. If I'm loaning in second position, you have to look at everything. You have to look at the person with a fine-tooth comb because the person could really, really screw you over, even if there's a lot of equity, if the person's not a good person. So you have to really make sure they have a good credit score. You have to make sure that they have a lot of good references. It's really, really important. It's just not worth the grief. Like I said, over 50% of people I know that loan in second money lose money. And even people that are really good at loaning in second position still lose money. So that just tells you how. So I just had a crazy situation where a friend of mine called me. They're like, man, I just loaned this person $100,000 in second position. They had a first position loan, $300,000, and like I would buy the property. They told me I would buy the property for $500,000. So I knew there was $200,000 equity. I loaned him 100,000, and anyhow, I just lost all my money. Like, it got foreclosed, I lost all my money. I'm like, how do you lose all your money? They only had 300,000, and even with late fees and attorney fees and missed payments, I mean, it couldn't have been 200,000. And they're like, you don't even understand what happened. I was like, well, tell me. I need to know. They said, well, the first position lender, the borrower came to the first position lender and said, look, I need some more money for this rehab. Can you add another 150,000 to my loan? And the first position is like, okay. They looked at it and they gave him another 100 whatever thousand because there was plenty of equity. And what happened was that 100 whatever thousand that they got did not go to third position. It just got attached to the first position because it was the same lender, same loan. So it's almost like, think about when a Bank of America, Wells Fargo, someone's behind on the mortgage and they do a loan modification. They add a lot of money to it and they put it on the back, but it stays in first position. So it's the same type of thing. So this person in second position had crazy amounts of equity. And because the original first position lender loaned more and just added it to the original loan, that person thought all that person's equity they thought they had was gone. This had nothing to do with late fees and attorney fees and foreclosure. This had to do with just that the first position is allowed to add money to their first position loan.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and what brings up a big issue, especially in the lending market, is making sure you understand where you are in that capital stack, right? If you are anything other than a first position, your risk profile is a not quite a vertical, but it is a very steep curve when it comes to looking at your risk profile for what you're doing when you're underwriting these loans. And typically, again, I've seen kind of a similar game play out over my career of the past 14 years doing this, is that the first position people, again, are there problems? Absolutely. Have I seen people have to go through foreclosures? Absolutely. But typically those people get the property back. They don't, rarely have I ever seen, I can maybe think less than five in however many hundreds of millions of dollars of capital I've been involved with, have had a serious problem in first position. Second positions, it's exponentially more. So it's a good thing to kind of look at, especially when people think creative. A lot of times people, when they hear that word creative financing, the second positions or the wraps and things like that, come to the surface. And again, can you be safe and do it? Certainly. But it's certainly something I would recommend people, is if you're new to this, let that be, kind of the graduate level course that you take in this. Don't let that be your core curriculum of learning how to do loans, is starting with second position, because your likelihood of getting burned is significantly higher. So let's look at kind of underwriting from your perspective, right? When it comes to actually looking at these, people that are, looking to borrow money, they're looking to do fix and flips. What's kind of, the price point that you really look at? Because properties, they can be everything from a, trailer in rural Georgia on some land, all the way up to multi-million-dollar, properties out in Roswell and Buckhead. So like, what's kind of the spot that you like to look at for the as-is value and then the ARV, and kind of what's some of the general underwriting that you like for your market?
So to get the as-is value, that's the only thing that's really important, is the as-is value. To get the as-is value, what you do is you take the ARV, what it's worth after it's fixed up, and then you figure out how much money does it need to get there. So if I have a property that the ARV is 300,000 and it needs $75,000 worth of work, the as-is value is 225,000. Now I'll take that 225,000 and loan somewhere between 70 and 80%. Why do I loan some people 70, some people 75, some people up to 80? Well, now I look at the person. Have I loaned to them a lot in the past? Have they always been on time? Are they borrowing money in an area that sells really fast? Are they borrowing money in an area that's slower? Is it rural? Is it not rural? If it's really rural, I might loan only 50 or 60% potentially. Or if it's like a weird type house that there's not many comps, I might loan even less. But the typical home that I lend on is probably somewhere between $150,000 and $300,000, and it's in within a 50 miles of Atlanta. So you could drive you could drive from Atlanta, you could get there in less than an hour. Those types of homes, sell pretty fast. Now there's some areas that are slower than others, so I'll loan a lower loan to value in those. And then again, we look at the borrower and see what type of history we have with them, and potentially you can look at their credit score and see what that. But I like to see the history more than anything. If I've done lots of deals with someone, I feel more comfortable. If I've done not as many deals, I don't feel as comfortable. If they paid me late in the past, I don't feel as comfortable. If they pay me on time every time, I feel more comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. You get to build that personal credit score with them, right?
Yeah.
Notwithstanding what FICO or Experian might say, that's the nice thing about loans is that you kind of get to have that, that interpersonal relationship between you and your borrowers. Again, get that repeat business and really kind of understand that, hey, like I understand what this person's doing, they do a good job at it, and you can kind of ride that wave with them as being their money guy to be able to kind of capture some of that. Now,
Yeah.
what you kind of brought up a good point is that, uh, you know, looking at them from a few different perspectives, you kind of alluded to it though, is that when you're doing fix and flip loans, you also have to keep a real close eye on the property market, right? So, if you're in somewhere and they're saying, "Hey, look, I got this property at a steal. It's a 750 ARV. I managed to pick it up for 250, and every single other house in that neighborhood, fully furnished, fully tooled up is 250 and going out the door." How many people want to live in that $1 million house in a $200,000 neighborhood?
Right.
So the velocity of how these things move is another kind of key component in that. So what are some factors that you really like to look at? Are you keeping, are you running, comps in the area? Is it just from
Yeah.
being in the area so long that you understand that? How do you kind of, get a pulse on the real estate market,
Yeah.
in your area?
I mean, I'm looking, I'm only doing pretty much the Atlanta market. I do some other places in Georgia, but primarily the Atlanta market. I know it backward and forward. I've been here doing it for, over 25 years. So I know it pretty well, but if even if I didn't know it well, I'm going to comp every property. I'm going to look, after I comp it, I'm going to then look to see, okay, is it, does it face a highway? Is it near a railroad track? Is it near a cemetery? Is it, by power lines? Is it, all these different things are important. Is it on the water? Is it not on the water? I'm going to compare it to, because some properties in the same neighborhood could be worth a lot less because maybe the lot's not good, especially in Georgia. The lot goes up and down like crazy. It's really hilly. So like a really good usable backyard is worth a lot more than one that doesn't have a backyard or something like that. So I look at that. Tremendously. And what's really cool about Atlanta and me lending is that there's not a property within an hour of Atlanta I wouldn't buy. I literally buy 12 to 15 properties a month that I fix and flip. And the only reason why I don't buy more is because that's as many good deals as I find. If I had more good deals, I'd be buying a lot more. So every single property that I loan money on, I would buy for the same or even a little bit more than I loan on it. And that helps me because if someone doesn't pay, I know that I would buy it for more than that. So it's really safe, and then I'll take it and make more money on it. So I know the areas very well, but again, you could go on to Zillow or wherever you want, MLS, and comp every property and see what they're worth. You get pictures, you figure out what the rehab is. You can kind of figure out where you're at with every property, and that's really the way to do it. If you don't know how to underwrite and know how to comp these properties, you should never loan money because that's another way you could lose a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly. And that's especially getting into the, rehab and not necessarily the longer term, like, you're doing these loans for, I'd imagine a max, like hard max of like 9 months to 12 months, right? Like it's probably not
Yeah,
anything like past that. So if you're
yeah.
looking
Well,
at that, you're really kind of dependent on the real estate market as well for underwriting
mhm.
to that
Yeah,
perspective.
I'm looking to see, has the market been going down, staying the same, going up, and then if I see the market starting to go down, I'm going to loan a lower loan to value because I'm thinking, okay, it might keep going down. But yeah, so as far as the time frame you said, yeah, my average loan is about 6 months. What I do on my loans, I do 6 month balloons, and then I do another 6 month extension for a percent. If you want to get into the money part of it, like how much I charge, what do people pay, all that, that's kind of a fun, cool aspect because that's where you see how the money is made. But what I charge on my loans and are a little bit different than what other people, but it works really well. People love it. I'm very easy. I could fund a deal within a day, 2 days, 3 days. I don't need to go through a couple weeks of rigorous, underwriting and appraisals and all that. I do my own comps and my own appraisals, and I have my own inspectors that goes out to every property every day the second I need them to. So I have people here that can do that. I charge a half a point at close. So people that don't know what a point is, that's a percent. So on a $100,000 loan, I'm charging $500 at close, and then I charge 1.5% a month, interest only. So for every 100,000, I'm collecting 1,500 a month, and then I use my own money for a good bit of the loans I do out, but then I have investors for probably 2/3 of them right now. So the investors that I pay them. I have investors I pay 8%, 9%, 10, 12, whatever, 11. The highest investor I pay 12% to, and this is annually. So every single person that I loan money to pays me monthly, which is really important. That's the other thing I see. Some people are like, oh, just pay me at the end when you sell it. those deals go bad a lot more because people don't feel like they're paying money every month, so they don't feel it. I make sure every loan I have, I get monthly interest payments, and I also pay my investors every single month before the first. So let's just say I pay my investor 12% annually. For every $100,000, I'm paying them $1,000 a month. For every $100,000, I'm collecting $1,500 a month. So I'm making $500 a month on all the loans that I have investors, and the loans that I don't have investors, I'm making the full $1,500. And then, of course, if it goes more than 6 months, I charge extension fees. Most loans don't go over 6 months. Most of them are really close to that. So that's the money part of it. And then I'm always getting more people that need loans. Everybody in the Atlanta market knows me pretty well. I've been around so long, and I speak at a lot of meetups, nationally, but definitely in Atlanta all the time, every month. And I do lots of deals with a lot of people. So, people are always sending me deals to buy. People are always sending me deals to loan on. People are always sending me deals just to help them figure out stuff. And, that's kind of what I do. So everyone knows me for that. So I have a big name here in Atlanta. But as far as what I see, like a lot of hard money lenders charge more points up front. So they might charge like 2 to 3 points up front. 3 is pretty common, especially if you need appraisals and all kinds of other fees. So people are paying, and then maybe they're paying 12% a year. So they're paying 1% a month. But because most loans are about 6 months, if you're paying 3 points up front and 1% a month, you end up paying more than what I'm charging, which is 1.5% a month. Because in 6 months, I'm charging basically the same amount that they're charging at 3 points and 1%. And a lot of people paid off a little bit early. And plus, with hard money lenders, it takes 2-3 weeks minimum that I've seen, sometimes even longer, to get the loan to the closing table because there's so many different paperwork you have to fill out. Where for me, there's very little you have to fill out. There's a few things, but it's like it can be done literally in 30 minutes, and I could send inspectors out, and we could have everything done. I need pictures. I need someone to physically go there and look at it because I have had people a long time ago when I used to tell people just send me pictures and whatever. People would send me pictures of a house, and it was the wrong house. They would just send me pictures of a house that they weren't even loaning on. That's happened a bunch in the past. So I was
seeing clients get burned on that exact thing too.
And even videos. They'll send videos of the wrong house. So
yeah, thank God for Google Earth. That's what I gotta say. When people really start being able to use that. I saw a client that happened. Thankfully, it was prior to close. But I'm talking like closing was at like 3, and they called and they were like at like 11. They're like, pump the brakes. I think there's a big issue. And a few days later, they were like, I got pictures from the wrong address.
Wrong house. Or they'll send you pictures of what it looked like 6 months ago and it burned down last month. You know what I mean? Like that happens as well. So you've got to have somebody go out there like before you loan the money. And, and then the next thing we could talk about, unless you want to add more to this, is, all the collateral that you need to make sure you're safe.
Yeah. The one thing I do, because I numbers guy. I love the numbers aspect of it. So
yeah, me too. That's the funnest part for me.
That's the best part about loans, right? Is the creativity that you get to pack into these things. My question though, again, kind of the, especially for people that are a little bit more familiar with the hard money or the short-term lending space, a lot of the times people think it's a lot more points up front, right? And I'd be kind of interested to know, again, you hit it pretty well, but just to expound a little bit on that, was it a time that you kind of graduated into less points up front and then doing the interest that you do, doing the interest payments like you do now? Was there kind of a catalyst moment you were like, hey, this probably works better than doing that? Or is that something that you kind of from the rip were like, hey, look, let's charge, let's do 0.5 point instead of 3 up front? Or let's, did you go from like 2 to 1.5? Like, what was that kind of life cycle of figuring out the like best effective range for your points on the loan?
I kind of started doing what I'm doing now, like when I first started, and it just worked really well. And people are like, man, it's so much better than a hard money lender because I don't have to come up with as much up front. And on top of that, if I pay it off before 6 months, I'm saving money. But literally most people, even if they're paying me a little bit more, said they'd rather use me because I could close so fast. And they don't have to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork and give their DNA samples and blood work and everything else. So like most people just want to do it because it's simple. But I just got it to where on top of it being more simple and easy for everybody, it's also more cost effective, and they have a little bit more money on the front end that they need to start the rehab, because instead of, that 3 points adds up.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely a psychological factor in there as well. If you can give someone, especially if they're working on the property, again, that appearance of a good deal is great, but also a good deal is even better. And if you can combine those two things, I mean, you're going to be doing pretty good in it. And I've seen that play out extremely effectively. I'll not go too long into the example, but it was an equity participation kind of back and forth partnership between these two fix and flippers, right? And they were using their IRAs, which again, if you want to lend, IRAs are a fantastic way
Yeah.
to not deal with tenants and termites. So,
Mhm.
shameless plug for the Advanta side of that. But what they would do is they were both contractors and they would go out and they had a bunch of networks and they'd take their IRAs. Someone needed a fix and flip loan. Again, they did very well because just like you said, they could close quick. They did a point and a half, I think it was on the front end, but they did all equity participation. So it was no payments. But basically, they were kind of always working alongside these things. So maybe not what you like to do on, kind of that risk profile of them paying, but man, they found a niche and every 3 months they would be turning around like an effective almost 30% return on their money,
Yeah.
right? They put 100,000 out, they say for a third of the profits at close or a fifth of the profits at close, and they would just recycle these things back and back and back. And that was probably the two guys that really turned my like my attention into lending. Another guy was in Georgia. Maybe if we have enough time, we'll tell that story. It was a mobile home community up by Lake Lanier that I swear they had a money machine that was printing out of that place. It was super cool. So, yeah, that the aspect of that you mentioned again is if you can position yourself in a better position, no pun intended, than the other kind of more institutional people in your space. Again, real estate, if you can be, first to strike, you're going to be a lot more successful than other people. So if you can kind of reduce that barrier to entry for people that need the money, make sure you have the systems to qualify, underwrite, make sure you're doing everything right. But if you can be the first person to give them the check, you're going to get more deals, right? I think that's a very key thing that you mentioned that oftentimes gets overlooked. You get analysis paralysis, want to underwrite this thing till it's dead, and you can underwrite a deal till it's dead. You absolutely can. So, making sure you have that ability to, really get out there and figure it out, but also have something that works well for everyone and gives the people that are flipping these properties the ability to do their job, which is one, pay you, but two, flip the darn property, right? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that's kind of a few key things that I really want people to kind of hear from what he said on that. So yeah, the kind of branching, from there, I'll let you kind of get into your next point.
Yeah, so as far as investors go, we'll talk in the collateral, but as far as investors go, I have a lot of different people that I know that are friends of mine that used to give me a certain amount of money to put into deals. Now, when you put money into deals, there's two ways to do it legally. So as someone that has investors, there's only two ways to do it legally. First, you have to have a fund, like that's regulated, a federal fund that you have people put money into, and it's regulated by the SEC. That's one way. If you just get money from people and invest it for them, that's technically illegal, and you could kind of get in trouble if anyone ever says anything or anything goes bad. But the second way that I put people's money into play, and this is better for the people, and this is how I do most of my loans, is not through my fund, although I do have a fund. It's through having people fund deals, the whole deal. So for instance, let's say I have a deal that needs $200,000 to be funded. I will be the manager of the deal. I'm going to show the person the deal. I'm going to introduce them to the closing attorney, and I'm going to say, look, this is what I think it's worth. I'm going to go ahead and back it. If they don't pay, I'll pay anyway, and I'll buy it back from you, and I'll manage it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay you your interest every single month before the first. I'm going to have to worry about collecting the money from them. You don't have to collect the money. So I'm managing it. So that's why I'm making my fee, because I'm collecting the money and I'm paying you. And I always pay everyone by the first, whether I get paid or not. And then what I do is why this is legal is because I have the person look at all the deals that I have to fund for that week or whatever they want. They're going to pick the deal that they want. They're going to wire the money directly to the closing attorney, and I never touch any money. The only money I ever touch in any transaction is the actual interest that I collect and that I pay. But as far as principal money, I never touch it. So when I connect them with the deal, they're going to like it. They're going to look at it. I'm going to show them what I think it's worth and everything else. And then they're going to wire the money to the attorney. When the closing is done, the property sells, the attorney is going to get the money and wire it right back to that investor. And then they're going to sign off a release. So because the I do all that, and on top of that, the person that's investing the money has all the collateral in their name. So if something happened to me, nothing's in my name. Now, what are the collateral? The collateral are the security deed, the promissory note, the title insurance, and the homeowner's insurance. Those are the four important things. So all that stuff is in the investor's name. Nothing's in my name. So because I'm just giving them the deal, that's the reason why I could get around not going through the fund. But they're literally on all the documents. And if I got hit by a truck and died tomorrow, it doesn't matter because they have all the protection. And I was just managing the loan for them. So I have a separate deal with my investors that say, look, I'm paying you 10% or 12%, whatever it is. And I'm going to pay you monthly. I'm going to pay you regardless if the borrower gets paid or not. If there's any problems, I'll take care of it. If we need to foreclose, I'll take care of it and buy the property back from you, and all that stuff. So that's the second way I do it. And that's the way most people do it because they actually have all the collateral that they need in case something happens. Where if you go through the fund, you don't really have, really good collateral if something happens. You could potentially lose money if something goes bad and the person that runs the fund dies or whatever.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool avenues as far as like looking at it from the investor side of this, right?
Mhm.
And kind of what you just mentioned. I mean, like, when it comes to owning property, right? People understand that there's a lot of different ways to make money on a piece of real estate, right? You can buy it, you can flip it, you can sell it. You could be a landlord, right? And that's kind of the other analogs that we're talking about here is that you kind of become the landlord in a sense, that you're kind of acting more as a loan servicer, right? Again, not specifically to that capacity, but there's a lot of other ways to make money on these things, whether or not you necessarily have the money to fund a deal or even really want to be involved in that process, right? There's so many cool avenues when it comes to that. And again, setting up a fund is definitely not something that I'd recommend 90% of the population kind of,
No.
aspire to, right? It's a full-time job, right? Being a fund manager. And there's a lot of legal red tape and things that you have to abide with the government for. But, just like people might, wholesale properties out, right? You can get into that kind of aspect with loans, right? You can buy them, you can sell them. There's so much more than just like finding someone that needs money and lending it to them. And that's again one of my more favorite aspects of lending. And to the other point too, so many people are get so burdened with owning property, right? You have to deal with tenants, termites, liability. One of the cool things about lending is the reduction in liability that you have from being invested in real estate, right? One of an investor I admire quite a bit lives down here in Florida is Pete Fortunato. If anyone's ever been in the southeastern Florida, you've probably run across that name. Been down here for ages. But he has a great quote. Anyone asks him about liability is that, people, when they trip and fall and sue someone in a house, they trip over the rusty nail or the loose floorboard. They don't trip over the mortgage, right? They don't trip over the paper, right? You get to, still be involved. That mortgage is still attached to that house. Your security is still there. But at the end of the day, you don't have to worry about, those angry tenants, those little wood destroying termites that are literally swarming in Florida. I walked my dog last night and I'm swatting them off. It's terribly annoying. But that's another really interesting aspect of lending in real estate is that you don't have that component of liability. Do you need to underwrite these things? Absolutely. Do you need to make sure people are going to pay you back? Yes. If they don't pay you back, do you need to have some recourse to make sure that you're made whole? Certainly. But you get to remove that big thing that everyone's so concerned about in real estate, which is getting sued. And certainly, you can absolutely get sued lending money to people, but you're removing one of those kind of big, glaring things, the elephant in the elephant in the room that might trample you, right? So
Yep.
again, those are some really big aspects that I enjoy about the lending side of things. Now, when it comes to kind of the back end of these loans, do you do anything interesting or unique on the back end? Do you have any early payment penalties or any things that you like to underwrite into those deals to
Oh
make
yeah.
sure you're making
Yeah.
money?
Yeah. So I have a 2 month minimum. So if someone pays off the loan before 2 months, I always collect 2 months of interest at the end, no matter what.
Okay. Yeah, and that's again to kind of a point I made in the very beginning. You want to have your money working long enough to make it worth your while. But if someone's going to repay you, the next day after close, you're never going to make any money in this business.
Unless you're charging 3 points, then you're fine. Who cares?
Yeah, there you go. You can certainly make it worth your while. And again, there's the aspects of some of the different kind of cool stuff. I think we have a little bit of time. I like to tell this story because it's
Okay.
just one of the things that what I really love about the creative financing aspect. So it's the state of Georgia, right? Had a client that bought a small mobile home park that had 9 pads on it, right? And they were all quarter-acre pads. Things are massive, right? So he buys it, closes it in his IRA. And then I get a bunch of paperwork to replat everything to subdivide each one of these pads by thirds. So he goes from 9 to 27 different pads, right? And there was only like 3 trailers out there to begin with, super rural. But his brother was in the junk and land clearing business and would constantly come across these old trailers, right? So he get these things drug in, like 1956 Hortons, all these old trailers, do a little rehab, put them out there, eventually got it all tooled up, was renting them out. Then he would sell them on retail installment contracts because you can basically treat the loans on these things like a motor vehicle, right? It's big old long shit. If you've ever seen one in the state of Georgia, it's like a I don't know, a 29, 30-inch sheet of paper that you have as carbon copies stamped to it. Do these retail installment contract mortgages on this piece of on these mobile homes, right? So these people would go from renting them to then owning the mobile home. He still kept the dirt, and then if they didn't pay, which again his niche was people that were a little bit higher risk, it was basically like repossessing a vehicle, but they still paid lot rent. So he'd be making about 16% interest on the ownership of that mobile home right there, and then if he had to foreclose, going to the DMV to foreclose, and he just constantly kept turning these things over on these retail installment mortgage contracts on these trailers in rural Georgia and just made hand over fist money. It was one of the cooler aspects of creative financing that I've ever seen to this day in 14 years of doing this. So I always like to tell that story when I'm talking about creative financing because it is about as creative as you can kind of get with putting together, marrying real estate and and creative financing. And maybe wasn't that off too. Maybe do you have kind of a story that sticks out to you of one of the more interesting creative deals that you put together that was more of a home run than you anticipated in your career? One that you could pick out. I'm sure you got plenty.
I mean, mine are pretty much straightforward now to where there's not really a whole lot of crazy upside or anything. I would say the ones that I did the best on, I probably have like a couple loans I foreclose on every year out of like 1,000 that I do every year.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the ones I've foreclosed on, I've made some home runs on. People, I mean, some people just have so much equity, and for whatever reason, they don't realize it. And I've taken properties over where I made an extra $80,000 where I was making a few thousand a month on it.
Yeah.
So I've had stuff like that happen, but that's probably the most creative thing. Just people that are idiots not paying, and then just let me take properties over where they have so much equity.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make. Underwrite the deal properly, and the propensity of human nature to do the dumb thing might actually work in your favor.
Yeah. People don't let me foreclose because they have too much equity. That's the reason why I don't get to foreclose much.
Yeah.
First off, I'm on the business of foreclosing, so I don't want to have to foreclose. But you have to be really safe. So if you do, you make extra money or you're safe. But you'll have to foreclose on a lot of properties if you loan too much. If you loan the right amount, if you loan too little, you're never going to foreclose. So
Yeah.
it's just that's going to stop you from foreclosing, just not loaning people more than it's worth.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, understanding, like all the things we're talking about, understanding the market, not loaning too little, not loaning too much. But again, those are the key points that we really kind of got across here, which I'm really happy about, are the nature of the fix and flip market and how it can be done to a very effective degree, right? Because more often than people, especially that I talk to, or especially in this market, are getting concerned about things cooling off, interest rates, with at least what the Fed is doing, so the commercial side, Fannie Freddie, and how that's affecting the residential real estate market. But you can really fill a niche, especially if you're operating in that like you said, $200, $300, $400 market. A $40,000 market of that more affordable house that everyone's looking for, that these rehabbers are bringing onto the market. You can really fill that need that people want and need for these more affordable houses to really make a lot of money doing it.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So if people are interested in learning more about what you have going on, whether it's opportunities to invest alongside you or more education that you have going on, what's the best way they can reach out to you, Abraham?
Yeah, so the best way is to reach out to me on Facebook. My name is Abraham Gray, Gray. On Instagram, Abraham Gray Official. A YouTube channel, I post videos, every week. And I talk about all the different deals I buy, all the different deals I lend on. I show you cool stories. And then, of course, my email address is how eventually everyone gets a hold of me. And that's my name, Abraham, Abraham, and then at MMAATL.com. So it's like MMA, like mixed martial arts, and then ATL, like Atlanta. So Abraham at MMAATL.com. If you email me, I respond to every email pretty fast. Definitely the same day, but usually, sometimes I even respond before you even send the email. That's how fast sometimes I am. But
There you go. That's something to aspire to for all of us, right?
yeah, yeah. But I'm really good. I mean, that's how I make money. I respond to people. We do deals together. I want you to make money. I want to make money. We want to buy stuff, sell stuff, loan. So it's important to stay on top of everything. But those are the best ways. If you're in Atlanta, or you're visiting, there's many local meetups every single month, and reach out to me, ask me where the local meetups are, and I'll introduce you to the people that run them, and then you can get on the list and you can see all the different local meetups. Most of them are free. There's a couple that are like $20-$30 or something, but most of them are free. And you come and there are a few hours, and we go through everything: real estate, lending, whatever. So
awesome.
Yeah, hit me up if you want to know about those.
Great. Well, Abraham, I really appreciate you being on with this today. It was a fantastic conversation. Really hope everyone got some good value out of it. Again, I encourage you to reach out if you want to learn more about private lending, especially if you're in the metro Atlanta area. It's always good to have people that are local, especially where we have a footprint as well. With that said, this has been another edition of the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast. My name is Alex Perny, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you for tuning in to the Alternative Investing Advantage podcast. Tune in next week for more investing tips and strategies.
Want to hear more episodes of the Alternative Investing Advantage? Search podcast at advantaira.com and subscribe.